If we feel exhausted by this thing, that's only because we're lucky.
Changing the structure, I think, has higher import than changing the oppressor's heart. Liberation is more important.
All right, well, hello. Welcome to another episode of Owls at Dawn. We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world and decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. I am Austin Hayden Smith.
And I am Troy Polidori.
And we are going to get into it, as always. And we got a special guest for you this week on our main segment, Matthew Telle, activist, writer, all-around amazing dude, is going to come on and talk with us about resistance. But, before then, we got other shit to get to.
And Warriors fan. That should go on his tagline too, right? All right, so for our first segment, as always, we have the Shitty Minute. This is where one of us rants about whatever's grinding our gears this week. Austin, you have it. So what do you got?
All right, so this week, my Shitty Minute is going to be dedicated to Socrates. Sort of, not really, but it's the idea of self-examination. So we could also say that it could be dedicated to Foucault, the idea of the concern for the self or care for the self. But more particularly, I guess it'll be in the Socratic tradition, because one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is how unwilling people are to examine themselves and to be self-critical. I had a professor when I was doing my MA in Nottingham, as a brilliant scholar by the name of Philip Goodchild, who I think recently his research has been centered around piety, not in an explicitly religious sense, although he does always dabble in philosophy of religion, critical theory sort of analysis. But he's been really interested in piety, I think, just in a sort of more post-religious or secular frame. And there's something really interesting, because what he would do is he would actually sit down on a daily basis with just a pen and a paper in his hand, without any books or without the internet or without any distractions, and he would just write and think and journal. And there's something about that as an art form or as a discipline, as a practice, that I find is so useful and so interesting. And although I am not nearly as disciplined as he was with his daily habits, it is something that I try to do, whether or not I have a pen and a paper in hand or my laptop open, or whether or not I'm just, on a bus with my eyes closed, just thinking. One of the things that I try to do is constantly examine myself, not just not in like the Christian mortification of the sin, sort of like examining the errors that I made the night before in the sort of Stoic sense, like you'll hear a lot about, but more about a sort of just thinking about what I'm thinking and why I'm thinking it and how I'm thinking it. And yeah, I guess there will be those sort of Stoic or Epicurean tendencies where I will think about, the mistakes that I made or the weaknesses that I'm exhibiting, things like that. But I hope it's not morose, I think is my point, is that it's not the sort of puritanical, morose, John Owen sort of thing that you get in certain communities. But it's something that I don't think a lot of people do, and it's I don't know, man. It seems that people have no fucking self-awareness. Like, literally, I think, Donald Rumsfeld did the whole, like, they're the known knowns and known unknowns and blah, blah, blah. And then, Zizek talks about the, the unknown knowns?
Unknown knowns, ideology.
Exactly. And maybe if it's an unknown known, you can't fully know what your ideology is, but there are ways of exploring that I think are really useful in developing ourselves as more complete human beings, that will help us to break free from the rigid ideological structures that prevent us from connecting with other human beings, or that prevent us from actually analyzing and accessing information that's presented to us. And we get stuck in our silos and we play these fucking team games. And I think one of the huge reasons that we are so inclined to do that is because we just don't have the skills for self-criticism, for self-analysis. And yeah, it's hard fucking work, man. It's hard fucking work. I'm reading The Affluent Society by John Kenneth Galbraith right now. And I don't remember the exact quote, but it's at the end of, I think, the 11th chapter. And he says something along the lines of this. And it's got to be a well-known quote, but it's basically something along the lines of, it's easier to set the anchor of nonsense than it is to set yourselves free into the oceans of thought, is basically the idea. And it's easier to just hold on to that anchor of nonsense than to actually critically engage with thought. And I don't know, man, it just fucking drives me crazy that people have no ability or willingness to be self-critical. And I think I do it to a fault sometimes, so much so that I almost wonder if I just have no commitments or attachments to anything, if I'm just totally non-committal. Because I'm constantly just changing my mind and analyzing myself and criticizing myself and thinking about things. And I'm always sort of teetering on that edge of crisis. And I don't know. I think that there's something really useful about that. Because for some reason I'm able to do it in a way that it doesn't drive people crazy. I know I talk with people about it sometimes. They're like, Jesus, that sounds dire. And I'm like, no, it's not dire at all. I find it really stimulating and it's actually rejuvenating to me. But I can see why it sounds frightening, because it is frightening to disrupt those comfortable foundations. But I don't know, man. It's driving me crazy because I just think it's an art form that is very sparse and that you don't see people have. They don't do it too much, man. And I think we should more so. So that's my shitty minute. Just be fucking self-critical. Analyze. Have concern for the self. Unravel yourself. Embrace crisis. Fall in love with process. It's okay. We'll make it through it.
I kind of want some smooth jazz music in a cocktail so we can have confessions with Austin.
Hey, I'll just start publishing my diary. Is that?
Let's make this a confessional hour. Let's just talk about all of our skeletons.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you, man. I mean, it's the first week of school just ended, and we started the second week. And in several of my classes, we always kind of start off talking a lot about Socrates, self-examination, self-awareness, Socratic wisdom, the whole thing, just like as a kind of stepping stone for the rest of the course, a thematic introduction. And so, yeah, it seems so important, even on the political scene. Like, not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but it's really interesting and not a coincidence, I think, that one of the major predictors for whether someone is, has more racist or xenophobic tendencies in their thought is whether or not they've actually experienced other cultures. Like having a passport and having visited a different country than your own, even just once, like radically changes how you think about different cultures. Speaking a different language is one of the greatest predictors for creative and original thought. Wow. As well as empathy. And it's, again, it's not to sort of pigeonhole a certain group as being the problem, but a lot of this sort of rhetoric appeals strictly to people who live in areas where you don't ever come across refugees. You don't ever come across illegal immigrants or anything like that. And they don't contribute to your society or even hurt your sort of neighborhood either. And so since they're alien and other, it's just an automatic refusal, because that's just how our brain works, right? Automatic refusal of whatever we can't easily normalize because it's probably dangerous or possibly dangerous. And a level of self-awareness and openness to experience can really affect all that stuff.
Yeah, 100%, man. Do you journal at all?
Nah, man, I tried it a couple times, and I just found like I was writing it and reading like, dude, if I come back to this in 5 years and read it, I'm going to think I'm such a fucking idiot.
Was it like overly pretentious or something?
No, I mean, I tried not to make it pretentious at all, but just writing about like daily life stuff and my experiences and my emotional state, and just felt like I'm not going to have anything. This isn't really helping me, and I'm not going to be able to do anything with this in the future. It just doesn't work for me.
Yes.
How do you find that it works for you?
I don't know. It's weird. I think that because I sometimes feel like I just need to be heard, I think that sometimes just putting something down on paper is a way of hearing myself, if that makes any sense at all. It's almost like empathy towards my other self, towards an externalization of myself. And for some reason that seems to create a dialogue partner. Jesus, that makes me sound schizophrenic, but
it's that vestigial Janesian stuff coming out.
But I think it does, is it creates a dialogue partner. It's really weird. I have this, and I know a lot of people have this too, but when I read something that I've written, even if it's just a couple weeks old, I swear to God, I'm like, it doesn't even seem like me. It's very easy for me to disconnect from things that I've said or things that I've thought or things that I've believed. And so I think when I write something, it's a way of me communicating. And I think because I'm so prone to external validation and because I'm so prone to being an extrovert and be socially connected with people, which is really ultimately about communication, it's almost a way of communicating with another individual, another self. And that self just happens to be an old self that was me. And yeah, and so I think that's where I find that there's some sort of value in it.
Yeah, that makes sense then, though, why it works for you and not for me, because I'm the exact opposite.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Well, I do think that people need to be fucking self-critical. You don't have to journal, but just fucking be aware, man. Be aware of your own biases and be aware of your own presuppositions, and don't be afraid to be fucking humble. You know? When somebody says, hey, I think you're being an asshole, don't just immediately turn it back on them and be like, you're an asshole. Maybe pause and be like, am I being an asshole? I might be an asshole. Sometimes I'm an asshole. When I do this and when I say this, I am being an asshole. That is okay. Be fucking self-critical, man. Jesus.
Austin, you're being kind of an asshole right now.
I'm sorry, man. All right, sweet. Well, let's go into our main segment this week. This week we have Matt Telle, who, if any of you were there for my drunken debacle on election night, Matt was involved with the conversation. But Matt is going to join us this week as we're going to talk about resistance, which seems to be the thing that everyone is talking about, whether it's the Grammys or the Academy Awards or whether it's late night talk show hosts or Trevor Noah. Everyone is talking about resisting Donald Trump. So we're going to talk about what is resistance, what's effective resistance, and yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we also wanted to bring up this week a somewhat popular topic of discussion was the hashtag alt-woke manifesto.
Yes.
Which made the rounds from the journal, online journal. Is it Triple Ampersand?
Yeah.
Is what it was called?
Yeah, that was it. So, Matt, were you able to see what the hashtag alt-woke manifesto was?
Yeah, man, I opened it just for a brief moment, so I didn't read the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of angst in it, so I just got maybe the first page through.
Yeah. Well, Troy, how do you want to start the conversation? How do you want to frame things off this week?
I guess maybe the most sort of recency bias thing we can just talk about is the Grammys. A lot of resisty rhetoric going on in the Grammys.
Yeah, apparently I sent you that thing on Twitter where J-Lo was resisty, and I don't know, man. How do you feel about all this stuff? I don't even really know how to start. There's so much, right?
Did either of you guys watch it? Because I didn't, so I'm not fully aware.
Yeah, I didn't watch that. I don't know if I've seen a live awards show in its entirety for a decade.
Yeah. I remember I used to watch the MTV Video Music Awards back in the day. I think I was like 12, and Bush did a live performance of Machine Head, and I think I got really into that at the time. But no, I just watched a couple of the highlight videos. So I watched Adele's acceptance speech that a couple of people were upset about. Angela Rye, do you guys follow her at all on Twitter?
No.
She's a political commentator, and she got, I guess, somewhat offended that Adele basically went up on stage and said thank you to Beyonce and then said something along the lines of, like, I thank you, and then said something like, my black friends thank you. And Angela Rye got a little offended by that, and then she went on a Twitter rampage, and then she did a little periscoping and tried to clarify some things, and her Twitter feed was blowing up. So I saw Adele's speech because I saw that, and I was like, I wondered if it was really offensive. And then I saw Chance the Rapper get all Christian-y and thank God a lot. And then I saw these dudes take their pants off and accept an award. I don't know if you heard about them. 21 Pilots. Yeah, 21 Pilots. They took their pants off, right? And they accepted the award for, I don't know, best pop album or some shit like that. But
that's pretty resisting.
What were they resisting in that? Yeah,
I don't even know. Yeah,
the ideological state apparatus that is pants.
I don't know. High thread counts. Yeah, I don't know. So I didn't really see too much, but I mean, it's the same shit though, right? It's the same shit, whether it's the Grammys or it's the Academy Awards or whether it's the BAFTAs. Like Ken Loach won for I, Daniel Blake at the BAFTAs, and he got all resisty against the austerity government here in the UK, or I'm not in the UK, I'm in Ireland, but over in the UK. And so it seems that there's, a lot of resistance taking place at the popular level. So I don't know. I guess I just wonder if it's useful or if it's diffusing energy in areas that wouldn't be better served, that would be better served in a more sort of directed or proactive sense. Or is there something, I don't know, or is this all good? Or is it all good? Is any resistance or any opposition, is it all good? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have the most well-formed thoughts about this, but my intuition is I love it when I saw the actual video of Tribe performing because I had to see that.
Yeah.
And when Busta Rhymes comes out and calls Trump President Agent Orange, that was pretty awesome. I was pretty into that. But at the same time, it does sort of feel like the way, maybe the mode of celebrity protest or celebrity resistance is almost like it's like a thing where people live vicariously through that when it's done on the Grammys or the Emmys or the Oscars or John Oliver's show or Trevor Noah. It's like because a famous celebrity who's good looking and charismatic resists in a way by celebrating them or tweeting about them, I'm resisting vicariously. And that's not the celebrity's fault necessarily, although I think with like the John Oliver types, it kind of is because they feed into it.
Right.
But it's not really their fault. I don't want to blame them. I don't blame Meryl Streep for, using her platform to speak on something important to her. Like, who could ever blame somebody for doing that? It's more the response and the way that action sort of has a node in culture where it replaces any sense of actual resistance. And so while those things aren't bad, it just does feel like the way we respond to it, especially with social media being so ubiquitous, treats those things as like the be all end all, as if that is resistance, which of course we know that doesn't do anything. In fact, celebrity resistance in many ways is part of what drove so many, more working class people towards Trump against the celebrity culture that surrounded Clinton. They saw that stuff as empty and formless and void because by itself it kind of is.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to me that there might be multiple forms of resistance that need to be taking place. And as you said, Troy, having people stand up and speak to what's important to them is valid, but that can't be the only thing. And more importantly, we can't feel like we've done our job by vicariously approving a celebrity statement and letting that be the end of someone's form of resistance.
Yeah, but then there is something useful in it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that there's a place for a multitude of different forms to resistance. I don't think that it looks the same for everybody. That there needs to be resistance happening on all sorts of different levels and by all kinds of different people, where you have resistance being an attorney who's going to litigate voting right violations or immigration policy, or it may be an economist or philosopher imagining different types of power structures or different forms of economy. It could be people marching. When people take place in some of these forms of resistance, they're actually creating the thing that's the antithesis of what it is that they're resisting. So if you are resisting the way that Black communities are oppressed and you march with Black Lives Matters, you're actually showing a community strength instead of the weakness that you're fighting against. Or if you're marching in the Women's March, you're building a group that empowers women and allows them to be at the top of the power structure there. So you're creating that thing that you're fighting against. So there's a lot of different things that people can be doing. I don't think that it's just one, but one step is by speaking out and saying, hey, there's a problem here, and then letting these different steps of people who are on the ground do their thing.
Yeah, I think my issue is that I just wonder, from an analytical perspective, at what point is resistance active and at what point is it just simply reactive? I was talking with Troy last week, and I think I said something like, it just seems that so often a lot of this so-called resistance just seems reactionary or reactive. Whereas, and then I said, and I was wrong, actually, I think upon reflection, Troy, I think I said something like, I think that Trump the administration just seems to be active because they're just constantly bang, bang, bang. But the more I think about it, remember I was saying I was having a hard time articulating it. I said, I think that I'm sometimes more intuitive than I am articulate. And I think that I was intuiting something, and I think I figured out what it is, and not to oversimplify and just talk about the difference between a reactive force and an active force. But I think that essentially the Trump administration and that sort of the momentum, one that feeds, or that he's feeding, but one that is also kind of impelling him, I think it actually is essentially reactive. It's not active. It's not strong. It's very weak. And I think that my only concern is that to mix metaphors, is that he is setting the stakes of the game, or is establishing the playing field, and that a lot of times this resistance is taking place in reaction to that, on that playing field, rather than being an active force. And then what Matt was just saying is that, like with regards to BLM or the Women's March, if you're out there and you're actually forming those alternative communities in resistance to it, that's different, because that is an active force. That is, at the same time, you're distancing yourself from the reactive weakness of, whatever the bullshit, travel restriction, Muslim ban, whatever the fuck you want to call it is, or the just perpetuation of misogynistic rhetoric, or policies that are clearly targeting particular racial minority groups, whatever it is. There's an antagonism to that. And then at the same time, there's also a positive formation of community building in standing in solidarity with one another. And to me, that seems to be not just simply reactive, but active. And I kind of just want to understand a little bit more. What does it mean to actually be active as opposed to just simply reactive? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Could you say that the Trump ban stuff it's all reactive very clearly, but it's got the optics of action?
Yes.
Whereas left critique right now, it doesn't even have the optics of action.
It doesn't. Yes.
Clearly reactive and has no positive vision. It's even putting as a facade.
Yes. And it's this weird sarcasm, or that he started it. Like, I'm even hearing people on the supposed left, like within the Democratic Party, getting mad at Bernie because he's doing this, and he's dividing and conquering because he's critical of Hillary. And it just seems that there is this strange sort of he started it logic, or the kind of when you're a child, if everyone jumps off a bridge, are you going to jump off a bridge too? It's the sort of, well, they're doing it, so we're going to do it. And all of this is just like whiny bitch rhetoric, and it just feels so weak to me, man. It just feels so weak. And this is going to be the worst metaphor ever, or the worst analogy ever. But you guys are basketball fans, so I'm gonna do this. Did you guys see Kevin Durant go into OKC this past week?
Yeah.
Okay, so Kevin Durant goes into Oklahoma City, gets his fucking balls booed off, and at one point Russell Westbrook and him start jawing at each other, and then some other dude, I can't remember who it was, but like put his forehead on Kevin Durant. Who was that, Troy?
Roberson.
Yeah, Roberson.
That was Andre Roberson.
Yeah, right. Now, Kevin Durant was in a hostile environment, and he could have easily reacted in a way that was weak and reactive, and he didn't. What did he do? He put his head straight in that motherfucker's face, and he was just like, what are you going to do? What? And then when Russell Westbrook is like talking shit saying, I'm coming for you, I don't know what Durant said, but he basically like was lifting his arms in the air like, what are you going to do? And Russell Westbrook to me looked out of control, right? He looked like, I'm coming for you. Like he was flapping his arms in the air, trying to be all tough. Like he was fronting that he was actually strong, but it was just optics, right? Whereas Kevin Durant then was draining threes over Russell Westbrook's face and basically saying scoreboard, which I know that's a dumbass just sports analogy, but there's something in that because there was confidence and because he knew that he was in the right position, he's on the better team, he's the stronger player, he actually has the platform of power, he was able to stay calm and stay cool and actually end up being the powerful force. And for some reason I was watching that and I was thinking about that. And I know that's just a lame-ass analogy. And if someone's listening right now, they're like, Jesus Christ, jock apologetics or some shit like that. But I'm sorry. But if for some reason that seems to map on somewhat similarly to this, is that there doesn't seem to be any confidence, there doesn't seem to be any control, and because of that, there's no power that's actually being usefully wielded. And I don't want to say any, I'm overgeneralizing, but I'm saying that for rhetorical purposes, that it seems to be that there needs to be more of that. And I don't know. For some reason, it doesn't seem like that's the general thrust of the quote unquote hashtag resistance that's being memed all over the place.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty much in agreement that optics matter. They're not the be-all, end-all, and they certainly don't accomplish everything, but they matter. And so obviously mass protests are a lot more optically significant than celebrities opining on politics on TV. So things like the Women's March and Black Lives Matter and things are much more significant for changing national consciousness, for normalizing a degree of abnormality, if that makes sense. Like this is not right. Things are not going well. Keeping people's attention even when things start to get sort of the next new crisis is just another thing, and we don't care anymore. Like that, can't fall into that rut. So those optics do all those things for you, right? They change your perspective and regulate the way you view the world. It's important stuff.
Yeah.
It seems to.
No, go ahead, Matt.
Well, it seems to put pressure on politicians when you're able to create enough of a force, in these marches, and you're bringing out so many people that does it seems to maybe make a difference in terms of what they're able to do. So they don't want to have that happen every weekend, So that might have more power than some random celebrity getting up and saying something that's going to be probably pretty weak in terms of a statement. It's going to have something to do with like yada, 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 like we need to love each other, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
Something about like inclusion and like this isn't really who we are and stuff like that. And that doesn't end up doing much, I don't think. But if you're actually standing together with a certain amount of solidarity and force, there might be something that comes from that.
Yeah, and then the other side of all of this is maybe I'm just being a grump, and that any sort of resistance in any way whatsoever is at least a little bit of some sort of microaggression in favor of antagonism to the foe, right? So that even if the dude from Stranger Things gets up and goes on some sort of rant and that video goes viral, maybe if you are at home sitting on Facebook and you do watch that video and you like it and you share it and it somehow stimulates a positive affect within you, maybe that's a seed for more solidaristic resistance in the future. So maybe I shouldn't bitch and complain and criticize any sort of antagonism or resistance, because maybe it's all kind of flowing in a positive direction. And then maybe what that means is then, rather than criticizing what they're doing, maybe what we ought to do is then offer ways of saying, okay, so we've got this momentum. Let's not let it die. Let's keep building on it. And now that we have this, even in its micro forms and maybe its more diffuse forms on social media, in the version of snark or sarcasm or a share or some sort of memed hashtag, now let's figure out how to funnel that in more productive ways so that it is active and forceful and powerful, rather than just simply optical or aesthetic without any sort of value to it.
Yeah, let me play devil's advocate for a minute, though. That connection between the optics and the actual material resistance. I'm obviously very for mass protests, and I was incredibly encouraged by the Women's March a couple of weeks ago. I had family members who aren't terribly politicized, and they were there. And that was pretty cool to see in LA. At the same time, I remember my political consciousness was in large part formed during the Iraq War or 9/11 leading up to the Iraq War and that whole situation. And I think my first ever political debates I had with friends and with friends' parents and my own parents was about the Iraq War. And I was just a kid. I didn't know anything, but I did have some sense that this war didn't seem like it was on board. There was something that was nefarious about it that wasn't connected to legitimate grievances based upon 9/11. And so that made me think that for the first time, I kind of understand where the cynical, skeptical people are coming from. It also helped that I liked Rage Against the Machine and System of a Down a lot when I was a teenager. So that stuff politicized me. But I remember so strongly the Iraq War being the largest protests in the history of the world at the time. And they did absolutely nothing. In fact, they were even used by the Bush administration as a tool to say, we're so glad that we can have these protests in America, even against my administration's own policies, because it shows why we're superior to the nations that we need to fight against.
Wow.
And it was so ugly to see these mass protests be weaponized against themselves, against their own message.
Empire of Liberty, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. And I'm worried that even if we have the mass protests and we have the resisty feeling across all tribes and tongues, that if that's what it is, if it's just the protest, if it's just the signs, if it's just the expressing of my own inner discontent at my country's decisions. And now I don't know that Trump's as sort of rhetorically fluent. Can you believe I'm saying Trump's not as rhetorically fluent as Bush?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that. But he kind of, as much as Bush was Bush, his kind of everyday ho-dunk demeanor was great at not seeming evil, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's a guy you trust. You walk into the general store and George W. Bush is on the other side of the counter, like, you trust that guy not to rip you off.
Yeah.
And maybe Trump doesn't have that because he literally is a scam artist, like as a profession. But I do still worry that same thing can happen.
I worry about that as well. When you look at the history of protest, at least the modern history of protest, there doesn't seem to be much in the way of movement. That it brings us a lot of confirmation bias, and you're playing to your own party. We're all getting together and we're expressing the same opinion amongst ourselves. So it seems that there may be the need for a more positive message that can be driven, and something that people from outside of that group, that in-group, can latch onto. But the other thing that you saw in the civil rights movement, for instance, is the power of shame. And we talked about this at the election during that whole drunken debacle. We talked about shame and just the idea of, is that something that's useful? Is it something that's ethical? And I think that that's a tool that it's a coercive tool, but it's a powerful one where, you look at the civil rights movement and they were able to sufficiently shame people into changing policy against their own will and against their own ideas and ideologies, because they simply had to, because it looked so bad. And that's something that goes beyond simply shouting. That was something that people had to put themselves in actual harm's way in order for that shame to be fully implemented. So I don't know exactly how that happens in this case, but I do think that there is a place, especially when we're talking about how these types of policies that Trump and what he represents are pushing forward, how they actually affect human people.
Right.
There is perhaps a tool there where you can shame people into changing the policy. Now that doesn't change the happening beyond it. We saw there was the
Right.
effectiveness of the civil rights movement where they were able to get Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act in 64 and 65. But those things, the feelings that people had went underground and they changed. And they became different things. You can draw lines through Jim Crow to mass incarceration. There's all kinds of different examples of this even playing out today. But there was at least the beginnings of action, the beginnings of change, and maybe it wasn't followed through all the way.
Yeah. One of the things I wonder is, this kind of reminds me of when slavery was abolished as well. Part of the argument was equal rights before the law, which is a legal argument rather than a moral or ethical argument. And
right.
It sounds like the shame argument that you're talking about takes place at the level of legality rather than ethical, because it doesn't actually change people. But
correct.
If we are going to argue from a structuralist perspective, then we can argue that people would change over time if those structures, regardless of if they were shamed into transformation or if it was because of some sort of conversion experience, it doesn't matter. The point is if you change the structures, then maybe subsequent generations will also change as well. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. And even if the people themselves don't change, the structures have, right? So,
right.
And that's something that's important. Even if the racist attitudes of slaveholders didn't change, at least there wasn't slavery.
Right.
So like, the evangelical tendency of changing the heart is helpful, important. I think it's better for those people to not be racist, but not having slavery is more important. You know what I mean? So changing the structure, I think, has higher import than changing the oppressor's heart. Liberation is more important.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I've been thinking a lot about kind of shame in the public sphere and if it can be used as a tool, even when it can kind of seem a little bit, I don't know, like nefarious to use shame to kind of control people. And oftentimes it's used by smaller communities to control people in ways that obviously we would never like. But that doesn't mean because a tool is used in one way, in one context, it's not a tool in another. For instance, I've kind of vociferously attacked hypocrisy critiques a lot on this podcast, on Twitter or whatever. I kind of can't stand that stuff. I have a strict separation in my mind between hypocrisy critiques as a tool and using shame. I'm not sure I always thought that way, but even more recently, I've kind of been thinking about, you look at hypocrisy critique is when one is going for the heart, when it's trying to change the heart, but in a super cynical way by saying, oh, you did this one thing in the past. You criticized Obama for golfing, and now Trump's golfing. Or you criticized Hillary for her emails, but now Trump is having a situation room sit down in the Mar-a-Lago restaurant or whatever. Oh, I want to hear more about emails now. Like, that's a super cynical way to try and to kind of control somebody and make them convert their hearts, change their mind, which of course never works. And two, no one expects to work. It just gives you a sense of, it's like pure id, and it gives you a sense of moral superiority over somebody else. It's a way to puff oneself up. Whereas using shame, like Matt's talking about the civil rights movement, one of the biggest notable points in the civil rights movement was the sort of publicization of mass beatings and stuff. Like, that stuff came out, and even people on the fence were like, oh shit, like, this is serious. I can't believe this is happening. Right. Similarly, the Muslim ban stuff was probably the worst decision Trump could have made. Like, the whole stuff about trial balloons for a coup or whatever, like every Medium blog post was talking about. Like, that's all kind of ridiculous. But the fact was, the Muslim ban, and even that general terminology, was fairly popular in America 2 months ago. Like, almost a majority, right around 50-50, people supported it, which is pretty incredible. It makes me like cringe. Now it's dropped like 6 to 9 points in popularity.
Well, and it's because
just a couple months.
It's because of, if you're going to talk about shame, it's because of the way that this particular travel restriction ban was enacted. Was that people with green cards, families, were torn apart. Students who had been enrolled in university and they were just home for a little bit, or people who were engineers, or there were human faces that were placed onto this otherwise kind of amorphous blank idea that I think brought people to a sort of empathic connection to the consequences of what happens when you make a sweeping declaration like this. And it made people think, oh, okay, wait, that's not what we want to stand for. That's not what we want, the American value system to represent. And so there was a shame.
Yeah, it doesn't mean those individuals like all of a sudden wanted to devote all their time to helping refugees.
No.
And the whole complaint about, well, it's just moral grandstanding. People just want to pretend like they're supporting refugees and they don't want to actually do anything to help them. Like that's just treading on the same logic, that it has to be all about personal, heart-based empathy. Whereas this is more about shame. People saw this stuff. They saw the stuff on the news about people being a 5-year-old being handcuffed, and they saw all this stuff, and they kind of reacted in the way we would all tend to react, which is just kind of shock. And that changes people's minds more than being called the hypocrites or any attacks on their personal self.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the terrifying other that they were afraid of, and that terrifying other was a 5-year-old, or was a mother, or was an elderly person. And you see those images, and there's only so much of that shit you can take before you're like, all right. I can't stand so adamantly on this position anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe I do, but I can't say it out loud like I could before.
Which is so important, right? It's so important to not be able to say things out loud.
Huge.
So important.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I still have that evangelical tendency or desire for conversion, and I think for me I still want to dialogue with people and connect with people and get them to understand, and then articulate that they understand, and then change.
Absolutely.
And so that's a hard tendency for me to overcome or to move past.
I have that same inclination, but what that does is that puts a greater import on the oppressor, or on the one that stands by the oppressor, over the oppressed. If my energy is being funneled towards changing the heart of the oppressor, more than my energy is being funneled into liberating the oppressed. And sometimes those come in, sometimes it's the same thing. Sometimes it's by changing people's attitudes, and in changing their attitudes, changing their votes, the way that they push for policy that does end up liberating the oppressed. But that needs to be the primary focus in my mind as I go about the strategy of resistance.
Yeah, this could be kind of a crude analogy as I'm thinking about it, but I mean,
as crude as Kevin Durant going into Oklahoma City.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna be way more crude than that. Think about.
I'm excited.
Just think for a second about how Jesus talks to like the Pharisees, like the oppressors, right? And even the Roman officials. He's not like, let's sit down, let's talk, let's compromise, let's figure out why you think the way that you do and how we can change your mind about your legalism and the way that you treat, tax collectors and sinners. No, he's just like, yo, whitewash tombs. I'm going to wreck shit. Basically, my nicest thing I'm going to say to you is give up all your shit and follow me carrying your cross. Like an impossible demand you will never meet, and I know you'll never meet it. That's why I'm saying it. Like he had no time for that. And he was much more concerned with actually being with tax collectors and sinners. And then through seeing that, a person of his authority doing that, some of the oppressors saw that and were like, wow, that's actually like, oh my God, I had no idea all along. Right. So like, it doesn't seem like sitting down with those in power and trying to explain to them why their power has corrupted them. That just doesn't work.
Right.
Like, and so an emphasis on being with the oppressed and the marginalized. And then at best, you hope that those who have power realize that that's not a life worth living. But you can't just sit back and try to like convince them otherwise. They've sort of gotten their power by spending their entire lives avoiding those kinds of things. So they're really damn good at it.
So Jesus Shaq dunked on people. Is that what we're saying? Like if we're gonna blend the two analogies,
yeah,
just dunked on them and has got his junk in their face. The steps over him.
That's right. Well, Vince Carter over that European dude.
Oh, Frederick Weiss, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, practically, does this basically mean, in terms of tactics now or strategies that are used for resistance, one is use the tactic of shame, use a strategy of shaming. And then how do you shame? You shame not through trying to reason and deconstruct through hypocrisy critiques or various other sort of reactive modes of communication, but through the active implementation of the alternative or some sort of what does the active force look like? I mean, outside of just the tactics of shaming, I mean, how do you actually employ this sort of active strategy?
Yeah, this is a good question because I think we can bring in the alt woke stuff here.
Yeah.
That article, manifesto, I'm sorry, it was very strange. I feel like I don't have a good handle on exactly what it's proposing. Although some of the things that were mentioned were kind of interesting to think about in the sense that this article is proposing a sort of amoralism and a post-truth, but for the left.
Right.
And so they want to create this active force. They want to no longer be reactive. They don't want to be based upon hypocrisy critiques. They don't want to be a party of the establishment. They want to be a resistance movement that utilizes basically all the same functionally directed tools that maybe the alt-right does, but for the sake of different goals, obviously. And they kind of oppose themselves to the woke left, which is the celebrity left, and the popular academic left that cares more about, I don't know, like policy stuff and the levers of sort of political establishment than about resistance. Now that was interesting to think about. First of all, is that even a thing that can happen? A post-truth, amoral left, and would that be effective if it were a thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's very post-structuralist. Like it's very post-structuralist anarchist. Did you guys have you ever read or heard of a guy named Todd May? He's a political philosopher. I think he's at Clemson or something like that right now. He wrote a book called Post-Structuralist Anarchism or Philosophy of Post-Structuralist Anarchism, something like that. And he's kind of a Deleuzian, Foucauldian, anarchist, but not in like the just straight up anti-hierarchy, but much more about, maybe you could call him like an anarcho-communist type of dude. And this kind of reminds me of something that would come out of that world, where it's in some ways beholden to a postmodern, post-structuralist critique of narratives or large-scale progressive leftist politics. But at the same time, it isn't just going to get mired in, I guess, like anti-facts or like the trope understanding of postmodernism, where it's just whatever's right for you is right for you. So it isn't that sort of bumper sticker postmodernism, but at the same time, it's taking seriously the post-structuralist critiques of modernity, and it's trying to navigate between like liberalism and Marxism, something like that.
It's straight up proposing like be a dick, like dox the doxers, and like go onto alt-right forums and disrupt everything and do the shit that they do on Reddit, I guess, essentially.
Yeah, out meme them.
Yeah, that made me cringe. Out meme alt-right. I don't want to have to take responsibility. Is that like a thing? Can that happen? Am I just being like cynical academic white guy by thinking that, or my intuitive response is just like, oh my God, no, thank you. Never.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just don't know if there are enough people to do it. Like, are there enough people that are down for that shit? Because there are a lot of alt-right motherfuckers sitting on those Reddit boards and on 4chan and 8chan and whatnot that are they're amped up. They've got ammunition. So I mean, I don't know. Are there enough people that would be alt woke to engage in this process?
That all sounds exhausting, man.
It does sound exhausting.
I know, right? But that's the exact feeling after reading the article. Man, this sounds like I would be so like fed up with life after doing all this shit.
Yeah,
I can't imagine.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Does that mean that a positive vision, like, I don't know, are we naive for maybe defaulting towards a positive vision that actually has some classical ideological elements to it? Like a degree of fundamental equality and justice, and like maybe even an establishment that works for the betterment of everybody? Or is that just as like inherently corrupted?
Yeah, maybe we're just romantics, huh? When it comes down to it.
That, I think, is an important part of resistance, an honest view of what the problems are, being able to look straight in the face of it. And I think that this is something that progressives as well as conservatives do, which is sort of find the idyllic picture of, America and sort of stop there and like, oh, well, we need to go back to that. Or even if it's progressive and you just say, well, the ideal we need to go back to. And you're not willing to say, oh, no, this thing's corrupted and we need to look forward instead. I don't think that you can effectively resist if you're not accurately looking at the problem.
Yeah.
And that is something where maybe we do romanticize the ability of the structures that we have, or the ability of the populace to move in a direction that we find more life-giving, or one that has greater sense of justice or equality. Maybe there's the need to recognize that what we have right now didn't come from nowhere, and it wasn't some sort of fascist crew by a bunch of brilliant masterminds. Like, that's the thing. There's the narrative like, oh, well, these guys are coming in and look at all the things that they're doing and look at the way that Trump distracts you and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, this assumes that these people are a lot smarter than I think that they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe instead they just tapped into what was already there, and they're just more uncouth rather than radically different,
I don't know. I feel like you guys are not really
if you see
admitting their attraction to Trump's alpha male sexuality.
Yeah, well, he is quite the alpha. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of what I meant with regard to them being within that post-structuralist lineage. I think that the hashtag alt woke manifesto, it doesn't seem in any way shy or or worried about radical dispersion and the unbounded flows of potentiality. And they're okay with just sort of riding the waves of whatever the fuck the landscape of the Twitterverse and the hashtag memetic-verse is offering. But they're going to harness that power and take those flows of energy and put them in another direction rather than the direction of nationalism or white supremacy or something like that. They're going to kind of harness them for more egalitarian purposes. And maybe, and I think there's something useful in that. Like when I read the manifesto, my initial reaction was that it seemed sincere in some ways, but that at the same time it had a real sense of preciousness about it. Does that make sense? Preciousness that just rubbed me wrong. Or maybe it was too self-serious. Anytime something is labeled a manifesto, like the meta-modern manifesto, I automatically am just like, I don't know. For some reason, it just seems it's really hard for me to take it so seriously. But then again, this goes back to me not wanting to just poo-poo somebody who might actually be doing something that is building genuine momentum in a way that will actually create some sort of concentrated energy of resistance that is useful. And I am a pragmatist when it comes down to it. And it is about the usefulness of these things. And if this is useful, I'm not saying it's a be-all, end-all, but fuck, maybe for this month it's useful, or maybe for 2017 it's useful, or maybe somehow in the construction of particular subjects, this alt-woke manifesto is useful. And so I don't want to shit on it. But I don't know. I also don't want to just be too inclusive and all-encompassing and just start embracing everything, because then maybe it will diffuse that energy rather than allowing it to actually be productive.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you don't have to fall into cynical opportunism to have a positive vision. Nor do you have to fall into optimistic naivete where you just nostalgically reach back for the time when America was great, like in the 60s, when it was great for returning GIs who got to have practically free houses and then, fuck everybody else, minorities and women. And so there's a sense in which it's just something we haven't tried before, it feels like, in American history. A positive futural vision about a society that isn't necessarily based upon parts of our past that we're nostalgic about. We don't have a strong socialist history, although we have socialists, Eugene Debs, W.E.B. Du Bois, and others who sort of we can reference back to that. But this is just nowhere near as strong as countries in Europe otherwise.
Well, so what do you think, Matt? I know you said you've been writing a little bit about resistance lately. I guess in summation here, what are some final comments that you guys have? Matt, what are you writing about? And then Troy, you're always good with capstoning things. So what do you guys think?
The thing that I've been thinking about just is, saying that resistance is something that's necessary, because there are people in power with ideologies that are dangerous towards vulnerable people, that have always been dangerous towards vulnerable people, and there's enough power in place to enact them. And a lot of people are in a position where these things are ugly and these things are embarrassing, but they're not affecting them, at least in the first degree. And I think it's good to remember that there are real human people whose actual bodies are affected by the things that these people represent, that the administration represents. And for the sake of justice, for the sake of these people to be active, to be activated. And, in that, I think that there, like I said before, I think there's a lot of different means and avenues. I think that it's important that we are working at the theoretical level as we're trying to create different types of structures. But we also have to be working because there have to be stopgaps where there's sort of the idea of there's the necessary first aid along with triage, along with surgery and transplant, where they're all necessary. and it's necessary at the beginning to get the bleeding stopped, or in actual danger and we're actually being oppressed. Good to recognize that and to be engaged on all of those levels. And I think it's good to recognize that resistance is something that's beautiful, because it's life-giving, because it shows and creates these new relational structures. As you're resisting within community, you're building that very thing that is your ideal. So I would say resist your churches, resist your family, resist your friends, resist poisonous ideologies, resist injustice, resist all of those things, and find the way to do so in an active sense, not just a passive one, through actual creation, through art, through beauty, through action.
I don't want to leave it at that. Although I'll add, I heard a really cool phrase that I think works well with what Matt just said and the great analogy about hospitals. Political exhaustion is a hallmark of privilege. Like, I get to be exhausted by the political scene because I'm white and nothing is really going to hurt me. Same thing with you too, Austin, right? Like, we get to be exhausted because really most of this stuff doesn't heavily affect us, other than maybe, if the economy dips or we go to war, then yeah, okay, we'll be affected by it. But at least so far, nothing really, right? For a whole lot of people, it's not the case. You don't have time to be exhausted. You don't have the chance to be exhausted. And so we should recognize if we feel exhausted by this thing, that that's only because we're lucky. And that should spur us on to be able to get past that exhaustion, power through it.
Matt, do you want to tell anybody where they can find out? Because you've been writing an awful lot. And I know your girl actually just wrote something the other day about in response to Elizabeth Warren and that whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And she persisted stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So where can people find your writing and whatnot?
There are limits to my creativity, and I can't write poetry or write songs because it's too to the point and too blunt. So my blog is called MatthewTelle.com.
There you go.
Yeah, no name, just my name. Someone else thought of that for me. So
that's right.
MatthewTelle.com.
Your parents did a good job with coming up with your website. Yeah, and Telle and they're not very creative.
No, I mean, Matthew is like the most popular name in 1985. So even I blame them for this.
Yeah, and Telle is Telle.
That's correct. Yeah, MatthewTelle.com. 2 T's in Matthew,Elle.
Sweet. Well, thanks for coming on so much, brother. We'll have to have you on again. It was nice that
appreciate it.
This one actually is going to make it into the iTunes store rather than the other one that's disappeared into the YouTube ether.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah,
I feel much better about this one.
Yeah. All right, brother. Thank you so much, man. We'll chat with you soon. All right, man.
For sure. Thank you, guys.
All right, dude.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
All right, peace.
All right, sweet. Well, again, thank you, Matt, for coming on and having a wonderful chat. So now we're going to go on to our next segment, which is Sticky Leaves. A segment where one of us gets to talk about what is giving us meaning in a world that is often devoid of meaning. Troy, you are the sticky one this week. What is your leaf?
Yeah, so my sticky leaves this week, I'm going to keep it relatively short because we've been going a little long on this one. But I'm really digging the young Pope.
Are you?
Are you watching this?
I am not. I'm hearing about it on Twitter and various social media places, and you've told me about it, but I have not seen it.
I think you'll love it, dude. I mean, it's not enjoyable in the same way other HBO kind of HBO fancy dramas are, but I love Jude Law as the Pope. He's ridiculous and so over the top and childish and autocratic, and it's just, I really, at a visceral level, I enjoy his character. And then on a more sophisticated, slightly more sophisticated level, the aesthetics of the show are great. Cinematography is beautiful. All the stuff in Vatican City is beautiful to watch. It's great. The title sequence of the show, which actually doesn't come into like the second or third episode, the title sequence is awesome. It's the Pope walking through somewhere in the Vatican, and there's a bunch of Baroque paintings in the wall, and there's just like CG stuff happening. I don't want to. You should see it. You'll like it a lot. But it's that, and like the I don't even know where the show is going as far as plot. I'm only about 5 or 6 episodes in, so I'm not caught up. But it's really prescient in the beginning. It's so funny. Like literally, this was all done like a year ago. The show's been out, I think, in Italy a little bit longer than here. There's a scene where the Pope sends one of his lackeys, who's Diane Keaton, who's a nun, and to go to start a press conference because he doesn't want to present himself to the public ever. He wants to be kind of a mysterious figure. He sends her to a press conference to read a statement and take no questions. And it's like a yelling statement.
Like Sean Spicer.
It literally was exactly. And I think that episode aired like the day before Spicer's first press conference, and it was like, what is going on here? And there's like 10 other things that are just way too coincidentally similar.
That is
to what's happening in America, and obviously it's just because they're kind of similar characters in certain ways,
right?
Trump and the Pope, but it's surrealist too. Like there's a kangaroo walking around the courtyard of Vatican City. Maybe something's going to happen with that. Maybe it's just Lynch. I don't know. Every scene where someone prays, and this show was great. Like you know how we're coming from a background where we practiced the art of prayer a lot as younger people, so we know what it's like. And whenever you see praying in a TV show or a movie, like you can tell the people who wrote this like have never prayed before, or like have no idea what they're doing, or have never been religious. And so all the prayers are really like formalized and beautiful and like so important, right? All the praying in this show is like perfunctory and stumbling and ridiculous, and it's all great. Every sex scene in the show is just ugly, like not sexy at all. It's the most unsexy sex scenes like ever, and I kind of love that. Even though maybe they'll get risque to a point where I won't like it anymore. But it's just everything about the show is so different and unique and weird. I don't know that it's good in every sense, but I'm really enjoying watching it, and I'm in it for the long haul for sure.
What's the deal? He's basically. He gets elected but it's like or not elected. He gets chosen, but under weird circumstances, right? There's something going on. What's the basic plot?
Yeah, the basic plot is that Jude Law is the first American Pope, and he's very young. His mentor is an American cardinal who was supposed to be the first American Pope, and he was much more qualified. But somehow, through some weird machinations that no one really understands, at least yet, Jude Law. Lenny was elected, and since it's all mysterious how the elections happen, it's supposed to be the Holy Spirit who's electing and the whole thing, right? So it's a bit of a mystery at the center of the show. How and why did this guy who really nobody knows or likes got elected, and who's pretty unqualified and seems to be like to the detriment of the Catholic Church's reputation in the world. How did this happen? So there's that mystery element as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, man. You told me about it, and I've seen a couple trailers, and I've heard people talking about it, but I have not checked it out yet. But I definitely will have to.
It's fantastic, and it's not at all cynical. At least not yet. I was worried about that, like HBO drama about the Catholic Church. Oh, it's going to be so incredibly cynical. Everyone's going to be like the biggest hypocrite ever and evil. And there's lots of evil and lots of bad dudes, but it's not cynical. Even the people who are kind of antagonists, I understand them, and their faith is at least somewhat, in many cases, is somewhat authentic, even though it's complicated. And the Pope wears fucking bomb ass hoodies. He's got like a papal hoodie. Like what the fuck? There's no way Francis wears that shit.
Yeah. I wonder if you could buy one of those badass papal hoodies and just rock that style.
Yeah, I'd be Catholic for that.
All right.
I'm coming back home, Mother Rome.
Papal hoodies.
Give me a hoodie. right, so for our last segment here, before we throw it to Michael for This Week in Hip Hop, I think we kind of have to bullshit about Valentine's Day because that's this week.
Yes, it is this week.
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. Well, I went to a restaurant the other night. It was a really nice Italian restaurant here in Dublin. And, I mean, it was a nice restaurant. Nice stone walls and had these nice, like, pottery fresca things on the wall at certain points. And a few days before Valentine's Day, so it wasn't even Valentine's Day. But they had their Valentine's Day decorations up. And they were the cheesiest fucking 99-cent store Valentine's decorations I'd ever seen. Some of them were like hearts that were cut out, and then there were like the cheesy, cartoony, like bear with a heart that says Happy Valentine's Day on it. And I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, you know that there's something wrong with the holiday when they're trying so hard to fabricate romance that they're going to put that shit up in a nice restaurant. Like, what the fuck? Like, it just made the whole restaurant look cheesy. And that was supposed to be romantic? That's not romantic. Is that romantic?
I feel like forced celebration of your relationships is inherently unromantic. Am I going on a limb there?
Well, yeah, that obviously. But I think a lot of people think it is romantic.
Yeah, I don't think they actually believe that. They just have to say that. Otherwise, they get accused of something by their spouse.
Oh, so you're saying that this is a one-sided thing?
Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be from one side of the relationship to the other. It could be both ways. Reinforced guilt complexes, reciprocal.
Whatever it is, it's seriality is what it is. It's that external transcendent force that is imposing itself upon you that we appropriate, and then we feel guilty if we don't do it, and then we shame our partner and make them feel guilty for being a shitty person because they didn't get us a flower or a rose or a box of chocolates on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, dude, I don't remember. What's the story? Like, Saint Valentine, didn't he like marry people in the woods or something illegally? What was the deal?
I don't know, but that sounds way cooler than what we celebrate.
Yeah, I could be totally talking out of my ass, but something makes me think that that's what Valentine's Day was originally about, like celebration of love, even against like externally imposed threats against it. Like, I want to bring that shit back. Even if it's untrue, I don't give a shit. I want to bring that mythos back. Like, Valentine's Day is about sort of like overturning motherfucking oppression.
Yeah. Well,
about buying chocolates.
Right. And little, what were those little candies that said, like, will you be mine? And
those things are so gross, too.
What were they called? They tasted like chalk.
Like, I'd rather eat vegetables than that shit. Give me a carrot on Valentine's Day.
I know. It is such bullshit. But we do it anyway.
Yeah, so. Twitter's pretty bomb on Valentine's Day, too, so I'm cool with that.
Twitter is?
Yeah, it's all good jokes.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, good jokes on ridiculous holidays. That's what Twitter's for, right? Make all that perfunctory stuff you have to do every day a little bit more bearable.
Yeah, that's true. Is there anything redeeming about Valentine's Day?
I mean, if you get to eat delicious food, then I'm all for that.
Yeah?
Hang out with someone you like. That's cool, too.
Yeah. I mean, those are good things, but I guess you can do that. You can do that on any Tuesday, not just not just the 14th of February Tuesday. Yeah. You know,
have you ever like gone out on Valentine's Day for dinner on Valentine's Day in Los Angeles or in Southern California?
I'm pretty sure I have. Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Okay, isn't it? I've only done that a couple times. It's like the worst thing in the world.
Well, it's ridiculous because every restaurant has a preset menu, and which is right? It's okay. But sometimes I go to a restaurant because I want their other menu. I don't want your preset menu with the only two options. I want the other thing that you're not offering that night. But there's a preset menu. It's really crowded. They usually cram in twice the amount of tables, which means that there are people literally eating on top of you at the table next to you. There are cheesy decorations, like I was talking about at this Italian restaurant that I was at. I don't know, man. Yeah, Valentine's Day, it can be kind of weird, but whatever, man. Fuck it. Sometimes the stupid shit is the real shit. So I'm just going to embrace it this year, Troy. I'm not going to be cynical. I'm just going to be totally Valentined out. Will you be my Valentine, Troy?
If it means I get to fight oppression with you, then fuck yeah, I'm your Valentine.
Perfect. That's right. That's the real Saint Valentine, not this Hallmark Americanized Valentine. We're talking about old school Middle Ages Valentineism.
That may or may not be historically accurate, but who cares about that anyway?
Whatever. It was, mythology is important as long as it's useful, man.
Yeah, we're all woke on this Valentine's Day shit.
All woke Valentines, motherfuckers.
All right, so what's up in hip-hop this week, Michael?
With first-class legroom, free cocktails for everyone, and a schedule you can depend on.
Hey, what's up? This is Michael Burns with This Week in Hip Hop on Owls at Dawn. Nice to be with you. So this week I want to talk to you about a record that came out that I'm very excited about, and I hope you'll be excited about it too. We'll talk about a mixtape that came out this week that was a fun Valentine's Day themed thing for all of y'all that still believe in love or life after love. And then I'll say a few things about the Grammy Awards. Not that I care, but I guess I should, because there's a few rap-related things that happened, especially things including artists that we've discussed before. So let's start with the thing I am most excited about, the new record from Quelle Chris. This record is called Being You Is Great. I wish I could be you more often. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Quelle's music. I hope that you are. He's a dude that's based in New York. I'm pretty sure originally from Detroit. Very introspective, quirky, smart, dark, funny guy. This record has really good production. A lot of the production is by Quelle Chris himself. Mind Sign, Alchemist, Chris Keys, also on the production. A lot of good stuff. We got some scratches by House Shoes, I think. Features on this album, there's a lot. The ones that you might get the most excited about might be, I don't know, Rock Marciano, Jean Grey, Elzai, and my personal favorite rap artist, Homeboy Sandman. Musically, this record is fucking fantastic. I can't really say anything bad. The production is varied, and it's kind of like fuzzy and messy in a lot of different points. Really good drum loops, a lot of fun samples, a mix of kind of dystopian sounding on certain tracks and real soulful on other tracks. And I think it really uses music to kind of capture the psychological vibe going on the record. Maybe I'm wrong. You should listen to it. Lyrically, I don't know, there's a lot of existential stuff going on, a ton of introspection, looking at identity, expressing insecurity in a funny and complex way. Man, it's really great. And there's so much going on lyrically that I think you can listen to this shit over and over and enjoy it and find new stuff funny and find new stuff interesting and find new shit impressive. I've been loving it thus far. It's hard to really do straight up standout tracks because this is an album that I think really stands together as a coherent project really well. So definitely get this one and just hit play. If you're going to get it, I think you should go to Bandcamp because you can say how much money you want to give them, which is always dope. But standout tracks, if I have to say, the song called Buddies on there, and that song is come out before as a single. You might have heard it. It starts with the line, I fucks with myself, might bring myself some flowers, I'm in love with myself. Man, that song is cool. And that song deals with, I don't know, I think stuff we probably all deal with sometimes. Not being sure if we like ourselves or love ourselves, struggling with the confidence to be the person that can do the sort of stuff that we want to do. But it's really good. And it's cool that sort of, I fucks with myself, might bring myself some flowers, I'm in love with myself part comes back as a reprise on track 14. It seems to be the last track of the main album before the encore. The song is called It's Great to Be. So you hear that again, but buddies, check it out. And how about we listen to a little bit of that real quick.
I fucks with myself. Might bring myself some flowers. I'm in love with myself. I look in the mirror. Like, who is that nigga? I'm cool with that nigga. I'm through with these niggas. Might go on vacation. Just me and my nigga. My nigga is me.
So that was Buddies right there. Another track. This is great. That you're going to love. It's called Popeye. Has incredible production. It's really soulful vocal samples. It's been said that on this song, he's rapping from the perspective Popeye, the sailor man, not the chicken. Says he's kicking the can but never eats the spinach. It's really good. I think it really is one of the most soulful tracks on the record. Has a warmth to it that's really great, so I recommend checking that out. Another song that's really good called The Calm Before. I think The Calm Before might have one of my most favorite tracks just in terms of music on the song. A really cool kind of lo-fi drum beat. So you know what? How about we'll listen to a little bit of that real quick. So here's a little bit of Calm Before right now for your ears.
Go down, but we gon' stay up. When nectar come running over, but not skip thy cup. Something sweet. Grapevine, coast pick, valley fermented. Sipping on the image, trying to preserve some form of private reserve. Vintage, or at least if it was. That's a real cool necklace. Thanks, I got it.
And if you, like I do, like anyone that likes rap, does love Jean Grey, she comes through exceedingly hard on a song called The Prestige. Her verse just fucking slays. Talk about someone that's been dropping incredible verses for such a long time and still has it. And then the last track on the album called Pendulum Swing, produced by Alchemist. So you know that's real good. And featuring Homeboy fucking Sandman. So you know that's really good. So you know that there's no possible world where I don't make us listen to at least a second of Pendulum Swing featuring Alchemist and Homeboy Sandman. So here we go.
Meanwhile, I'll be building an igloo like I'm an Inuit. Here's your golden ticket to catch my solo, the symphony of the infinite. Forgive but not forget to tighten up the grip and live without regret. Yup.
Bad. Folks try to spook them like oops spaghetti. They've been plotting on the coup but can't coop percent. They gonna for the brothers like
Great, and those are just a few of my favorite tracks, but I really cannot say enough how much I like this record. Quelle Chris, Being You is great. I wish I could be you more often. I know we're very, very early into 2017, although I guess being almost a quarter of the way in isn't that early. But this is easily, I think, the strongest hip-hop project that's come out this year. I don't see a world in which this isn't on some top 10 list at the end of the year. But definitely check it out and use money to check it out. This is an independent artist who probably needs money to buy food and beer and weed and snacks and other things. Now, the last track featuring Homeboy Sandman leads into one of the other things I wanted to mention this week. Homeboy Sandman, along with everyone's friend Peter Rosenberg of Hot 97 and now ESPN fame, they put out a Valentine's mix. It's called Love Life. It's 5 old tracks that you've heard before from Homeboy Sandman on different projects talking about love. Many of them are great. 5 new tracks about love. Many of them are also great. And I think Homeboy Sandman has a really interesting perspective and a fun point of view when he's talking about love and romance and sex and all these sorts of things. So it's called Love Life. I think basically every music or rap blog on the goddamn planet posted that a couple days ago. So if you just Google Homeboy Sandman, Rosenberg, Love Life, you'll find it. And we don't just need love on the day that capitalism tells us we do. So listen to it whenever you feel like you need it. So those are 2 projects to listen to. The Grammys happened over the weekend. The Grammys are historically really bad about hip-hop music. Obviously, one of the worst examples is the time that Macklemore beat Kendrick Lamar. Damn. But this one was kind of cool. So Chance the Rapper won 3 Grammys. It's cool. He's an independent artist. People like Chance. I like Chance. He used winning as a platform to do some interesting things. He shouted out Fake Shore Drive and Andrew Barber of Fake Shore Drive, which is great. It's an awesome rap blog, the best Chicago rap blog. Read it if you don't. He also talked a lot about Jesus, and he claimed his victories in the name of the Lord. Interesting. I won't get into it because I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. It's interesting. Drake won the best rap performance for Hotline Bling, which is funny because he doesn't rap on that song. There's literally no rapping. So that's cool that the Grammy board is going to give their best rap song that doesn't have rap on it. But what is most important is a performance by Tribe Called Quest. They came out hard. Busta Rhymes referred to the Commander-in-Chief of the United States as President Agent Orange. He said some shit. They burst through a wall signifying diversity, bursting through the walls that President Trump is trying to build. Anderson .Paak was there playing drums and singing. They chanted resist. Man, it was good. It was political and it was brave. And I'll tell you this, for a group that has a median age of 44 years old, old guys are using their voice to make a fucking statement right now. These dudes are not backing away from shit. I will say this, as someone who was aged like halfway between the Tribe dudes and the younger generation, younger kids need to get it together. Use your platform. Say some shit. Do some things. But yeah, the Tribe performance made the Grammys worth it. I didn't watch it. I just watched clips. But that's all for this week. If you want to hit me up on Twitter at Mick O'Brien, be good to your family and be kind to those around you, and eat hamburgers. I'm really into hamburgers right now, so eat some fucking hamburgers. Just make sure you exercise so you don't get clogged arteries and die, because I know you have shit to live for. Stay around for the rest of the podcast. I love you guys. I'll catch you soon. I'm out.
Cruising the sky as smoothly as a bird, you scarcely realize you are traveling fast.
All right, sweet. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I actually was totally digging that. How do you say it? Quelle Chris album?
Yeah, Quelle Chris.
Have you heard of him before?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, I'd never heard of him. I actually had no idea how to spell his fucking name. And then I just wrote like Kwelli and then Chris, and nothing came up, and I was like, who is this guy? and then I typed in like new album, and then somehow it came up on news. So, but yeah, it's sick, man.
Yeah, I'm really digging, especially what's that song, Buddies?
Yeah.
The bigger hit of his? Yeah, it's some pretty fucked up stuff. I'm digging it.
I know. Did you check out the Love Life album? Get a little Valentine's romance in your life?
I don't know, man. That's a little self-love, isn't it? Oh, you're talking about the
Homeboy Sandman and
thing.
Rosenberg.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No, I haven't checked it out yet, but I didn't even hear that until after Valentine's Day was over, so I was over it.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. We're living in a post-love world.
We should make that our tagline. Podcast for a post-love world.
Boom. Done. Done and done. Sweet. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Owls at Dawn. Thanks so much to Matt, obviously, for coming on and chatting with us about resistance, giving us some things to think about. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at owls_at_dawn. Shoot us an email, owlsatdawnpodcast@gmail.com. And I think that is it. Yeah?
Yeah, reviews on iTunes. You want to go up there, drop us a 5-star rating and review. We'd appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we out, right?
We out.
Das Vidania, Amerikanski.